Who's there?
John Baker. Hi, Mike.
What are you doing out?
Well, it's election time. Guess what? And I'm here doing an interview with you.
Yes, well, of course, in the next few weeks you'll be doing hundreds of interviews with people, knocking on their doors.
I hope we'll be doing lots of hustings. We're certainly going to be doing lots of engagement with Durrell, the zoo, with Jersey Finance, with the youth, with the doctors. There's so many people want to come and say hello and have a say. And you know, the message is, if you get elected, remember us, and this is what we want.
What's the Durrell? What's that all about?
Oh, well, that's obviously the zoo. It's
at
the zoo, and it's a seminar. It's a Q&A. The public are invited as well, and that's all about, you know, the whole environment. Obviously, biodiversity, the island, protecting.
Which is one of your themes.
Oh, absolutely. I'm as green as you get.
Right. Because strangely enough, there are several green campaigns running, or it should be. There's several contestants with a green.
Yeah, I'd say
agenda.
there isn't green campaigns. I mean, I had thought about starting a green party, but I don't think it would get any traction. There are green candidates, and there's some very strong green candidates.
I don't quite know how they fit into the system, because it looks like they're all going to have a very wide agenda, things beyond green. Because obviously.
Well, I hope so, because obviously I don't stand just as a green candidate, and of course that's the danger of having a green party. People think you're just a bunch of tree huggers. You know, my manifesto is much broader than that.
It is, I appreciate that, yeah. But at the moment it's such a big issue. Climate change, and it's enough.
Well, climate change.
The whole world's not coping with climate change, so how one candidate in Jersey can cope with climate change and all the other issues is asking an awful lot.
Well, we touch the periphery of it. We want to protect the island. Okay, so there's people that argue we shouldn't be bothered about climate change because the island is so small. But if we all said that, you know, nothing would happen.
Exactly.
And the CO2 would build up, the oceans would rise, and you know, there'd be famine and world strife, there'd be civil war, and all sorts of things.
So far, is there any cooperation between you and the other notably environmental candidates?
Well, we talk to each other, but because there's separate election districts, you know, if there were island-wide, then sure there would be. But you know, we concentrate on our districts.
Will Durrell give the opportunity for coming together of people?
Oh, sure. All of these other events, you know, have people engaging, and we swap ideas. But I mean, I have dialogue with Sarah Howard, who's standing for Constable in Grooville. She's very green.
Right.
And there are other people. I mean, St Brillards is very rich in green candidates. I won't mention who. I don't need to give them any publicity, but maybe.
Well, you've got a candidate for constable in your very patch, and your constable is being challenged. A guy I've never heard of.
No, I don't know much about him, to be honest.
He's presenting on a different agenda, disability and green, I think. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if he's strong on green. He's strong on disability,
right.
I think, but I really don't know much about him. He hasn't really got out there and put his message across so far.
Of course, the parish, it's not my parish, St Helier is not my parish, but you're involved in parish matters, you have been for years.
Oh, absolutely.
What sort of things?
Oh, I go back to parish rates, and I was a member of the rates committee, and then I became chairman. And at the time, everything was done on the back of a fag packet. We basically computerised the rates in St Helier, and then went on to rationalise the rating of agricultural land by using digital mapping. And I think we upset a few farmers who had pretended they had 24 verges, but when we did the digital mapping and found out they had 36 verges, it was whoops.
Well, of course, there's always, for the farmers, there's always a broncage implication. The more land you've got on road.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you know, that's not news to them. If you buy land, you know, that comes a responsibility. But there are subsidies. There's not the sort of subsidies, to be fair, that you get in the UK. Green subsidies for looking after the land and keeping the biodiversity. But it's going that way. What we need to do is give farmers subsidies to look after the land, not to despoil the land with chemicals.
No, which is very difficult because we haven't got a wide range of crops to play with, have we?
Well, we could have if we went regenerative farming, for instance. The trouble is we have monocrops. And monocrops almost demand the use of chemicals because the money is in the volume. And we have these UK companies coming in and planting Jersey Royals, and all they're interested is tonnage. And tonnage you can get by just applying more and more fertiliser, which washes down the fields into the streams and ends up with, you know, green lettuce.
Well, it came to a bit of a shock to the population generally that one of the main growers of mixed vegetables has stopped. He said he can't carry on. It's
No,
not
the
economic.
competition is too strong, cheaper imports.
And of course, that is one of the pleas that we hear so often. We want to be self-sufficient on
Yeah,
veg.
well, I think
It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
We could, if we went to regenerative agriculture, that would save you. I won't go into great detail. It would save on diesel fuel because you don't use the tractors so much, and it would save on the cost of chemicals. You wouldn't need polythene, except you might need polythene tunnels, for instance. But regenerative agriculture is so much more efficient than this old-fashioned chemical agriculture.
You campaign on environmental issues, but of course, the environmental issues in St Helier are somewhat different from the ones in the countryside, aren't they? Because you've got vehicles, as we discovered the other day, which are talk in the street. You could hardly hear yourself think, never mind talk.
Well, the big difference between the town and the countryside is exactly that word, countryside. And what I want to do, I'd like to turn St Helier into a garden city and bring the countryside into the town. Now, here's an example. A friend of mine said to me the other day that we're an Institute of Directors talk seminar. And they asked the audience, how many of you live in St Helier? And the lady was looking around to see how many hands up. Not a single one. So these are, directors of companies, some small, some large, and they all live outside of St Helier. Why? Because it's more pleasant out there. There's trees, there's fields, there's birds singing. St Helier needs more green space, and that's my mission.
What I've been saying for years, that the farming industry basically is becoming a stage set. It's a backdrop.
Yeah.
For things for people, the tourists to come and take pictures of cows.
Yeah, well, the dairy industry's folded, isn't it?
That's right. So the whole purpose of agriculture has changed.
Absolutely.
I mean, as I keep saying too, they used to be called lawn cows because rich people in the UK, the Aristotle used to buy a couple of Jersey cows and they'd look pretty in front of their mansion, lawn cows, pretty. And that's what's happening now. The cows are going in front of posh people's houses and just lawn cows.
I don't know about that. I think it's more sheep. Sheep are traditionally the thing to have in front of a posh house because it saves on the lawnmower.
Well, so do chickens and that. So, how do you weld them together? You've got a town interests and you've got to have a countryside, but there's not much countryside in St Helier, is there?
That's not true, actually. St Helier has a lot of green fields, around to the north. St Helier is a big parish. And, if you talk about just the town, we haven't got a green in town. The trouble with town is, and one of the reasons I want to stand in central, is we haven't got much green space other than the east and the extreme east and the extreme west. So we've got People's Park and the Parade on the west, and we've got the Millennium Park on the east. Now we'd leave more, what we need is more green in the middle, pocket parks, small parks. And we need to extend Millennium Park. We could do that because we could extend over St Saviour's Road. JazzPCA want to sell some land there. You could build a nice country walk that will go right up to the schools. So you could walk from the west of the town, through Millennium Park, up through some beautiful countryside walks. You'd end up at Victoria College, Helier, Girls' College, and you'd be able to walk and cycle safely to school, which you can't at the moment.
Unfortunately, the opportunity to create open space in St Helier town park, doesn't happen very often. The gas business, a large area of land, the gas amateurs, the gas production plant, all that was able to, and most of that became so far a park. So that can be done. But if people own properties commercially generally or housing, they're not likely to want it demolished in order to create open space.
No, they wouldn't give it away, but obviously the government has powers if the incentive is to do these things. And some of my policies, and I'm not going to go into detail, are to introduce some environmental taxes that would bring some money in, and I'm talking about regular money. You don't get all this, I'm talking about a garden city, so I'm talking about greening the town. It doesn't come for nothing, so you have to have some revenue streams, and I've got ideas for that as well.
Well, of course, the original garden cities were funded in a large part by people who altruistic Quakers, a lot of them, all that sort of movement.
Yeah, but I think that's going to be replaced to some extent by infrastructure levies, parking charges. There's a lot of people that park for free in the town that could perhaps make a contribution. All the people that live in St Helier that park in public car parks overnight don't pay a penny, and yet those car parks cost money 24/7.
Well, there's a lot of people who have cars. They have to have cars in Jersey because they may not use them during the day if they're going to work, but they would use them during the week. They've got to have access to the whole island.
It's up to a point, but I mean, many cars, in many properties, many households have more than one car. I mean, I've been round, when I was last doing, walking around, promoting myself for a deputy at the by-election, I came across a house that had 8 vehicles.
Right.
I mean, they weren't all cars, there were some motorbikes.
Right.
So multiple vehicles. Why? What's the point of that? I mean, generally speaking, the wife has a car, the husband has a car, and then the kids grow up and they all want a car.
I'm interested because one of your projects is car sharing. Now I noted there were a couple of developments off Gloucester Street, and car sharing was part of the permit that was granted. And I've asked and asked and asked, what happened to those cars? Do they work within the buildings? Does anybody manage?
The EV do a lot of car sharing. They're now working with a lot of developers, Lamosre, Dandara and others, and where they're able to reduce the number of car spaces. So for instance, back in the old days, you'd have 1 car space per bedroom. And then that moved down to 1 car space per unit of accommodation.
Right.
Now when SOJDC build, it's 0.4 spaces per residential unit. And so the way they've done that is by allowing EV to come along and offer the facility to use the EV
Because it was
cars.
always a bugbear for us when we were designing properties.
Yeah.
The car standards, they were always talking about big American cars by the size you had to allow for.
Yeah, well,
and you could
hopefully-
get 3 of these little mini cars in that space.
Well, most of the electric cars now, as you know, are more sort of city-sized electric cars, more viable. What we've got to do is make sure we've got the right infrastructure. So every time somebody builds something new, whether it's an extension to a house or a large development, they must put the right infrastructure in place for charging. Because don't forget, by 2030, there'll be no more fossil fuel cars. And it mustn't come as a shock, we must plan for it.
Yeah. Now you're running your campaign, you're an independent.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't know what's going to happen to parties. Do you think they will survive?
Well, they'll have to evolve. I mean, even Reform is going to have to evolve to some extent. I mean, they're pushing the idea of socialism, which isn't as popular as it used to be. We've seen socialism fail in country after country. So they've got to evolve. These new parties that have come along are actually evolving as we talk.
Well,
two of them have merged.
They're evolving into socialist parties. This is one of the dialogues I've been having with people. They're evolving because they want to do things that are good for the community.
Well,
they want to provide.
Some of them are too far right.
They want to provide social housing. They want to have a decent medical scheme. They want good education. Well, these are all the basis of socialism.
But they're not moving to socialism. They're moving away from a very conservative liberal view to something more middle ground.
Well, I thought, why did they say liberal conservatives? What's that supposed to tell you?
Well, I don't know. It's
I mean, the Liberal Party,
isn't it?
the Liberals used, in the UK sense, used to have very socialist views on some things.
It's a badly named party, I must admit, and I think it doesn't come across.
And now they've joined together with Progress. I mean, obviously that's a marriage doomed to failure, isn't it?
I'm afraid it's not looking good, is it? But then we've got the government party, or the alliance as they call themselves, that aren't even a party.
No.
So what sort of statement does that make?
I don't know. I mean, because after this election, 22nd of June, it'll all be decided for another 4 years.
Yep.
There will be so many people elected. Independents, I think, will be rather stronger than
I think you'll find the independents, particularly if they're clever enough to get together. And I think, to be honest, I think we've started to do that.
Have you started?
Oh yes. If you're going to stand completely on your own, then you're going to find it tough. So if there's any independent candidates like that, want to give me a call. The contact details are on vote.ge.
And that little group has got 12 guaranteed seats. What do you think about the constables?
The constables, I think I've got another 4 years to go, and then there's going to be a movement, I think, for island-wide elections, and the constables can be constables. And if they want to be deputy, if they want to be in the States, they maybe will have to stand for the position of deputy. There's enough to do as a constable. Certainly look at St Helier. The constable St Helier has an onerous enough job without doing the state's jobs as well. I mean, our current constable, bless his heart, he's been there for years, he's doing a good job. But I think really all the constables...
Compared with the town constable's task is ridiculous compared with the other constables.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so overloaded, and he does his best. Yeah. He participates in many, many things.
And he's frustrated, I think, and certainly this constable's frustrated with a lack of support by the present town deputies. Now, I don't intend that to happen as far as I'm concerned. I've worked with the parish for 30 years. I'm not going to desert it.
What I've heard deputies say before, they're going to be united. They're going to present a force for St Helier, but it's never happened. Why is it?
Well, you've got some of them that work hard with St Helier. I mean, Ian the gardener, I work with a lot. A couple of others. I mean, even Sam Mezek, bless his heart, helped us, for instance, with the People's Park. When we saved People's Park, we had Deputy Jackie Hilton, and we had Sam Mezek, And quite honestly, there weren't many other St Helier representatives that helped us when we saved the park. Should have been more.
Well, of course, St Helier saved Sam Mesick at the last election, didn't it?
Yes,
so
yes,
presumably that's why he's
he
moved
scraped through, because I was supporting Moz Scott, and Moz Scott nearly beat him. But
that's right.
Sam didn't hold out much hope in the country parishes. But when he came and looked around St Helier and spent more time there, he realised.
But what does that tell us about the makeup of the island? There is this. Oh, everybody knows there's a divide.
There's a divide, quite clearly.
Why should there be a divide?
Because of the way the town is built. This old Victorian maritime town, had good, big aspirations, but it's been taken over by office blocks and concrete, and no thought has been given to green space.
Well, unfortunately, my view is the finance industry is the worst possible thing they could have brought into town, because it creates such a wealthy area.
Yeah.
People with so much money, you can't make that money growing potatoes.
No, I have to say,
you can't do it.
The finance industry's been good for the island, but it's also been bad. The current housing crisis, you could almost put down to finance industry.
Right.
It's the golden goose,
Yeah.
but it's laid a bit of a stinky egg with housing.
That's right. It has.
Yeah.
In your policy, another aspect of this, we've touched on the climate change.
Yeah.
Now that has got international aspects. Now it's an international finance centre, but I don't hear much, and I've been asking people, where's your international policies? What are you? Because we've had a fishing dispute, and they had the warships out for the fishing dispute.
Well, it's so weak. I mean, bless his heart, Ian Gorst, he's maybe doing a better job than he did when he was in charge of things, because he had many issues that people will blame him for. He tried his best, I think, with the fishing thing, but even he, I think, failed at the end of the day.
Well, it hasn't been resolved yet. I mean,
no, exactly. He's not secured.
It's filed away for further attention.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it was one that we weren't prepared for. It was a shock. And the French are so strong in the way they demand things. They burn sheep in public. They blockade. They do all sorts of things to have their way. They're bullies. And unfortunately, we caved in. Because we were frightened. We're frightened to get cut off from the electricity supply.
If you were able to choose, because I remember Mr. Shenton Senior.
Yeah.
When he first came into the States,
Dick Shenton.
Dick Shenton.
Yeah.
The reason he went to the States was because he couldn't sell his house at St Owen for the price he wanted. He hit price control.
Oh, yeah.
And on the basis of that, he entered the States, and he was in the States for a very long time.
Right.
Whether he was good or bad, I'm not going to say.
He was popular, yeah.
He was very popular.
Yeah.
But it was hardly a manifesto, was it? His personal grievance.
No, of course not. But of course, in those days, I think it was perhaps a little bit easier to get into the States.
Right.
I don't have any personal experience of it, but it seemed to me that the States back in the day was more professional people that had the time. So it was hoteliers, farmers,
right.
that type of person. Now, the more, if I can put it this way, working class people are involved in the States, and a lot of them, to be fair, depend on the salary that they get from the States. I don't know that they'd be getting pretty well paid jobs if they weren't in the States, to be honest, some of them. But, it's got a broader spectrum. And it's lost, I think, some of its edge, because, one of the things I bring to it, I'm a businessman, so I've got business experience. Right. So as well as being green, I've got that acumen as a businessman to get things done. So, so it's a balance of talents that you need in the States.
Can you run a green business here? Is it possible?
It's difficult. The problem with, for instance, agriculture at the moment is tied in with so many problems. Obviously, competition with imports. GST on food. There you go. That's a regressive tax that really we should get rid of completely. There's so many ways you could easily get rid of GST. GST was brought in because OZA from the others wanted to give away free money to the rich people with 0 to 10. And then corporation tax was done away with. So all the people that have got money, are not really paying their fair share. The people on the street are having to pay GST. And we've been very, very lucky that there hasn't been ratcheted up.
Unfortunately, we're just looking at the problems.
Yeah.
We're not looking at the solutions. That's my fault for running the interview in this direction.
Right,
There's simply not time to look at what proposals you have.
Okay.
Maybe if there's time, you can come back later in the campaign if there's time, but there's 93 candidates. I can't interview them all, but it'd be good to discuss specific proposals that you have.
Okay.
But there's not time today.
There's not time, but should we talk about the district?
Go on then.
What I'd like to do, because people are not used to the idea of these new districts. So can I show you the map?
Yeah, by all means.
So this is the map for our district.
Right.
So this is St Helier Central.
Right, and you can't see where, but I can see the polling station town hall right at the bottom.
No, that is not the case. The town hall's not in the district, and it's not a polling station.
Ah, right.
The polling stations are Rouge-Bouillon School to the east,
right,
and Springfield to the sorry,
okay.
I've got it the wrong way around. Rouge-Bouillon to the west,
right,
and Springfield to the east. Those are the two polling
What
stations.
are the landmarks? At the north, what's the biggest landmark?
Well, you've got, basically, it's the ring road.
Right.
So Robin Hood in the centre there is the ring road that goes round towards Rouge-Bouillon, down towards King Street. It doesn't touch King Street, but it misses King Street. King Street.
Does anybody get a sea view on this district?
No, no, not unless you're in a tower block somewhere.
Right.
Maybe Hugh Court or something. And then it goes round to St Saviour's Road on the east.
Okay.
So, that gives you a good idea of my central district.
Right.
It's the densest populated part of the island.
Right.
And it's the densest populated part of the town. And to some extent, it's the most deprived area. I mean, the north of town has, had so many promises about they'll do this, they'll do that. We had the Millennium Park, but there's still loads more to do, which is why I've chosen
Well, there were
district.
they were in several island plans, and nobody did. Development plans for specific areas. It never happened.
We've got a huge developments going on in the southwest.
Right.
The southwest quarter, the Esplanade Quarter master plan started. Now we've got the southwest development. There's 1,000 new homes going there. Not just homes, but there's open spaces. There's beautiful, beautiful places. In fact, it's up for award.
But when this is what bothers me, because I was designing buildings. You design hundreds of houses. But are these spaces open to everybody to go there and enjoy? I mean, that's what makes a housing. You just have zonal housing.
Well, that
is as dead as a dodo.
Yeah, that does happen as and when you can get a development big enough. So, for instance, we've got the development in Bath Street where you can go past Premier Inn, past the old Odeon, and there's a cut through to James Street, and then you can go on to the library. So they've done that. That's positive. There's the Ann Street development, which is another big development. That's got public open space. The southwest plans are excellent because there's open space all over the place. There's a Lido, a seawater Lido, there's gardens, there's all sorts. So and it's designed for public access, so that's positive.
If you were to do a Shenton Senior, select one of your campaigns.
Oh my God.
Which would it be?
Garden City, absolutely. If we can turn St Helier into a garden city, reduce the number of cars in terms of the cars that go through it, so cut out the rat runs. Bring in, low traffic neighbourhoods, this sort of thing. Low traffic neighbourhoods is where you've got a street that's used as a rat run. So you put a blockade in the middle, so the residents can still come in and out, but people can't use it as a shortcut. So the residents have a bit more peace and quiet. So that sort of thing. Some streets that could be closed in the day. I mean, to give you an example, Cattle Street is a little bit of a shortcut when you're on the way to the market. Or Cattle Street could be closed off. You could have the central market connected with the fish market. The current car parks that's used by telecoms could be turned into an open market, and Cattle Street closed for pedestrians. That would be wonderful.
I'm going to close now, but there's something beginning with H, which we haven't even mentioned.
Oh, the little hospital on the hill.
That's it. That's all you can say about it.
Okay.
It's been nice meeting you.
Thanks, Mike. Been fun.